He's the salty guardsman.
Howdy.
And I'm the grumpy guard. And this is the first What the Balls, or Whiskey Tango Bravo. This is where we just discuss whatever happens to be on our mind today. So what's the topic of discussion?
I don't know. What's the topic of discussion?
Well, I was poking around on Facebook and Fox News today, and well, I must say that while there was a fear of extensive rioting in Wisconsin after the Rittenhouse acquittal, I must say there wasn't that necessarily, but boy, howdy does Portland not disappoint. I mean, 200 rioters, it was declared a riot, busted out windows, set trash on fire, you know.
What is my question is what does Portland, Oregon have to do with Wisconsin?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, considering Portland, Oregon is 2,100 miles away from Kenosha. I'm thinking that these given rioters were following the narrative put up by the mainstream media.
Well, it is negative too.
Well, yeah, but they follow the narrative that not just the mainstream media put out, but liberal Democrats at large, in general, well, Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist, and that this is merely a demonstration of a corrupt legal system and how it favors whites over blacks. And it's like...
And that's the narrative, right?
That's the narrative.
Well, my question is how the hell is he a white supremacist when the people that he was defending himself against were white to begin with?
I have no idea. Not only that, I really don't see this as a race issue. I see this more of a class issue. I mean, if you think about it, with what people like Black Lives Matter and such are so against is, oh, it's mainly black people that are in prisons and in jail. Yeah, that's true. However, how many of them are poor? How many poor people in general can afford a good defense? And to say that only black people go to jail is inaccurate because, well, fuck, O.J. Simpson was guilty of sin, and he got away with it because he had a good defense. He had money. Yeah. Money talks. And on the same vein, on Facebook, a few of the comments I've seen have drawn parallels between and criticisms between the Kyle Rittenhouse acquittal and a couple of other cases, one of them being Cyntonia Brown. Cyntonia Brown was a alleged sex trafficking victim that killed her John and stole his car, I do believe. And one person was saying, you know, well, she shouldn't have been convicted. She should have went free. Well, that's kind of like saying, and the reason why she should have gone free is, well, it was self-defense and she was a victim. That's kind of like saying Eileen Wuornos should have never been arrested and executed for killing her Johns because, well, she was a victim of her own circumstances and she was raped. So it was self-defense. But
well, the thing of it is with Eileen Wuornos is the prosecution was able to prove that she had every intention of killing her Johns before she ever met with him.
And in that lies the rub. Because in Cyntonia Brown's case, yes, she was initially convicted and was sentenced to life in prison, served 15 years before she was granted, before she was pardoned by the governor, the then governor of Tennessee. I forgot his name.
Well,
the asswipe caved to political and celebrity pressure. Anyway.
What does celebrities have to do with anything anyway, other than
Excuse me.
Celebrities need to stay out of politics. Period. End of story.
They're paid to entertain. They're not paid for their opinion. But
I mean,
they are guaranteed free speech under the First Amendment.
Yes, they are guaranteed free speech under the First Amendment. But when they knowingly push false information, that's where I have an issue with it.
But going back to Cyntonia Brown, it was the reason why she was convicted is the evidence actually showed that she was in no way, shape, or form in harm's way. And yes, I know this is probably going to be a controversial opinion, but she was in no way, shape, or form in harm's way. He wasn't reaching for a gun. He was in otherwise defenseless position.
Now, the counter argument to that could be that the only way she felt she could get out of that situation was to get him, or catch him, rather, in a defenseless position and dispose of him.
So my question is, why not, after she shot him, why not call the cops? Why not try to get him aid? Why take his car and his guns and run?
That is a good question. I mean, to a point, you can argue circumstance where she just wanted out. She wanted away. I mean, in the case, the police admit that they were investigating him and on the verge.
Actually, that's a different case.
Oh, that's a different case?
That what you're referring to is the Chrystul Kizer case out of Kenosha, Wisconsin itself. Chrystul Kizer, the circumstances revolving around that is she originally got hooked up with, and I've already forgot his name. The information is somewhere else. Oops. Anyway, the person that she killed, by putting in an ad in Backpage, which is now defunct. Backpage was actually used for personal ads, and sex traffickers and prostitutes and would use Backpage, much like Craigslist has been used for in the past. In the past,
Craigslist did away with personal ads and everything like that.
But that was Backpage. And she put an ad in there because she was trying to pay for school books and stuff. And I'm wondering why a 16-year-old is doing that.
Yeah, that is a very big question. Is what cause would a 16-year-old have to pay for school books
and school supplies, unless she came from a poor, impoverished family? But even then,
there are places and charities that can help with things like that.
Yeah. But that's how she got hooked up with the person that she killed. And the reason why she did it yes, he was a accused sex offender, out on bail, I might add, come to find out. that got hold of her and was sex trafficking. She was a child sex I can't talk. She was involved in sex trafficking, and she claimed he was abusing her, and that's the reason why she killed him. The thing of it being is, and the reason why prosecutors are seeking life without parole for her, is she bragged about it on Facebook in possession of a firearm. What she did was she shot him twice and burned his house down and stole his car, which would give hints of premeditation. She burned the house down to try to cover up the crime and
So
took the car to Milwaukee.
So she know that just that bit of knowledge, without knowing anything else about the case, would indicate that she intentionally targeted
With the intention to rob.
with the
And that... Sorry.
no, it's. I mean, that's basically what I was trying to get at. You know, she intentionally targeted him. Whether or not she intended on killing him to begin with, that hasn't, information to my knowledge hasn't been released yet. But
Actually, the prosecution is alleging that she did target him to rob him, and that it was that she fully intended to kill him. You also got to bear in mind this case also started coming about in 2019. It did go back to, it was in appeals court in 2021, and the appeals court ruled that she could use an affirmative defense of self-defense after the trial court judge said, "Oh, hell no." Which I know that leads to a bigger question with you. Why does the judge have to approve that? And I wish I could answer that.
yeah, why does the judge have any say whatsoever as to what type of defense is used in the case? Period.
And they shouldn't. I mean, everybody should be able to defend themselves or have the defense that they choose to have. But that's where that is, and a trial date still has not been set.
Of course not. They're going to drag it out for as long as they can.
Well, you gotta keep in mind that I'm guessing the reason why it was finally decided on this year, September of this year, was because of COVID.
That could very well be.
I mean, and under Wisconsin state law, technically speaking, it can be seen as self-defense. The prosecution even opened the door for it when they admitted that, yes, they were looking at this guy for further charges of crimes against children. So they kind of, if they're really looking to prosecute her, they may have just hung themselves.
Yeah, that is a distinct possibility.
But, and with, and this case was brought up as a parallel to the Rittenhouse acquittal because, well, Rittenhouse was acquitted because it was self-defense. Well, she's claiming self-defense. Let's see if she's going to be acquitted too. Did I also mention Chrystul Kizer is black?
It's two different...
It's two different cases, two different circumstances.
Yeah, two different cases, two completely different sets of circumstances. And
not only that, a reasonable person would think of self-defense as the person is in immediate danger. Like, the person is coming at them with a weapon or chasing them down or whatever the case may be. Or physically threatening them in that moment.
I guess this is where we differ, because my opinion of self-defense is there is a threat of imminent harm. It may not be in that moment,
But there's a threat.
but there is a threat of imminent harm.
And there's one other catch to this whole self-defense thing, and that's, and this honestly could have bit Kyle Rittenhouse in the ass big time, except when it came to shooting Grosskreutz. And he, no, just Grosskreutz. Most self-defense laws, including that of Wisconsin, you are only allowed to use as much force as there is present. So if someone's coming at you with their fists, you can't shoot them. If someone brought a knife to a gunfight, you still can't shoot them. I mean, you can, but you can't use deadly force.
Yeah.
That's what's legally allowed. So when Huber was bashing
But
Rittenhouse in the head with a skateboard, I mean,
but then it goes back to the argument that a gun is the ultimate equalizer, because Rittenhouse is a 17-year-old boy, and the grown-ass man that was bashing him in the head with a skateboard
or kicking him in the head
was physically outstriped Rittenhouse in every way. Rittenhouse had no choice but to use the gun because he was physically incapable of any other defense.
Yes. Matter of fact, if I remember right, he was knocked to the ground on at least one or two occasions. How else would Rosenbaum be able to stomp him in the head? Or he would be able to bash him over the head with a skateboard?
Yeah, as the video showed.
Yeah, and I can't remember which one tried grabbing for Rittenhouse's firearm, but one of them was dumb enough to do that. And I'm also going to put this out there. Given the fact that Rosenbaum was a convicted child molester and Anthony Huber was convicted of domestic assault and was a domestic batterer, I'm just going to throw my opinion in there. Is it really any big loss?
That can be. That is a very.
I mean,
very heavily debated, and the topic that a lot of people have very strong opinions about, for and against. I mean,
and with topics such as crimes that are committed, people look at the circumstances, look at the victims, look at the perpetrator, and they assert objective moral assessments, as in that person that's making the assessment knows what's right and wrong. They feel that's how it should be for all of society, and that's not how it goes. That is definitely not how it goes. I saw one comment that said we don't have a justice system, we have a legal system, and it's absolutely right. Everyone's sense of justice is different.
Yeah. And as far as my opinion, as far as the Kyle Rittenhouse case goes, the jury is the final verdict. Literally.
The jury had the final say, and the system worked as it was intended.
Now, they may not agree with the
verdict, and no one has to. But the jury had the final say. They gave the verdict based off of evidence, not off of feelings, the way it was intended. I mean, case closed, in the story.
The most damning part of that whole thing was the prosecution gave the defense a completely different tape of what
What action of what?
video, not tape, but video of what actually happened.
Well,
It was a very very low quality video that was given to the defense, and that was to my knowledge, I haven't read up on it a whole lot, but to my knowledge, that was the only video that the defense was given when multiple videos existed.
I would like to believe the defense was given all videos and access to all evidence, but just based off of that, and what I saw of the trial, the prosecution had some very questionable tactics, rather unconstitutional tactics that they got called out on frequently.
And as far as the judge's conduct,
He followed the law, as far as I'm concerned.
he followed, yes, he followed the law, but by the same token, where the prosecution did violate Rittenhouse's constitutional rights, he should have stepped up and had the intestinal fortitude to say, no,
And
this is not going to happen.
And he did. Because where I said that the prosecution violated Rittenhouse's constitutional rights, it was what the prosecution did was during it was either cross-examination, rather. It was cross-examination. The prosecution asked Rittenhouse a question as to why he didn't say something or why he didn't do something that would directly conflicted with his Fifth Amendment right to self-incrimination. And the judge stepped up and said, nah.
Yes.
That is a constitutional right. You know that.
Yes, but what I'm referring to is the prosecution's withholding of evidence.
Yeah. That is a violation.
Yeah, the judge should have had the intestinal fortitude to step up and say, no, this is not going to happen.
Well,
the trial's put on hold indefinitely until all evidence.
Well, hold on. Why? And it came up during closing arguments is when that came up. Why do you think the jury was removed from the courtroom before he chastised the prosecution for it? And before he heard the motion for a mistrial? Mistrial with prejudice.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. The defense actually filed 2 mistrial motions. One with prejudice, one without. The one with prejudice, they would dismiss the entire case, and that be that. He couldn't be tried again. If it was if it was granted without prejudice, they could would have been able to try Rittenhouse again.
Yeah.
And I think, and it's not really I think, I know at this point that the judge elected to send him until the jury came back.
Yeah.
So, from deliberations with a verdict.
He was, in my personal opinion, he was hoping
he wouldn't have to rule.
Yeah, he was hoping he wouldn't have to rule. At least
on that front. And again, I looked at Facebook. Don't know how many times I can say this. I have seen so many comments, well, he shouldn't have been there in the first place. Well, guess what? The rioters shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, the people that were rioting shouldn't have been there. And the people that were rioting
were committing a crime. Actually, a whole litany of them.
And every last one of them should have been arrested and charged to begin with.
Well, going back to the recent Portland riot, out of the 200 people, only one person was arrested. I'm still trying to figure that shit out.
Yeah.
If 200 people are rioting, why arrest only one?
That's the same question that can be asked of every riot that has happened in the last, what, 4 years, 5 years, something like that.
Since Michael Brown.
Ever since Michael Brown, and
that was
and a handful before that.
That was 6 years ago, 6
Yeah.
or 7 years ago.
I mean, these people are showing up and literally rioting. There is nothing that can. There's no way that it can be stated that they are protests. Protests are, you stand there with signs and you make speeches, but other than that, you're peaceful. A riot, you are causing bodily harm. You're causing harm.
You're causing property damage, harm to people, and
it is illegal federally and by state law.
And municipal.
It is illegal. Every last one of these people should have been arrested.
Oh, not just them. Let's take it one step further. How about the celebrities that are calling for the violence? How about the liberal Democrats that are calling for the violence? Why aren't they in jail? Why aren't they being prosecuted? Oh, wait, I already said it. They may not be being prosecuted because they have money.
Yeah. Either they have money or they have influence.
But moreover, they did more to investigate the insurrection on the Capitol on January 6th. They put more effort into that than they did.
And they've made far more arrests in that.
And gotten far more convictions from that than they have the George Floyd riots, the Michael Brown riots. And going back to the George Floyd riots, for Black Lives Matter to say, oh yes, Black Lives Matter, you know, we want this, we want that, we want justice, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, here's the problem. David Dorn, killed during the George Floyd riots in St. Louis outside of a pawn shop. Yes, his alleged murderer, is sitting in jail right now awaiting trial. His pretrial sentencing, or his trial hearing, not sentencing, but hearing, is later on this year.
Yeah.
And David Dorn was murdered in 2020, June 2020, I think.
Yeah. And
that's been ongoing.
And the major thing there is David Dorn was black.
Yes, he was black. So was Patrick Underwood. He was a federal security officer guarding a federal building in Oakland, California. To my knowledge, no one has been arrested in that case. Where's the justice for him? Oh yeah, he was also black. Where's the justice for him? Why is the wheels of justice turning so slowly for David Dorn?
Yeah.
Where's their justice? Where's the justice for the black property owners, black business owners that were targeted during these riots? Because, best you believe, black businesses and black neighborhoods were targeted by these rioters.
Yes, and it was almost exclusively black business owners and black property owners.
So how can any organization say, oh, Black Lives Matter, if they're targeting blacks?
Well, and there's another one. I don't remember, and this is my fault for not looking further into it. But during one of the riots, I don't even remember where it happened, but a family home was lit on fire. The rioters blocked all exits to the home, including windows, with family members inside the home burning to death, and then prevented emergency services from gaining access to the home so that they could put the fire out and save the people inside. Where's the justice for those people?
Yeah, no shit. And the thing with these riots is they have me concerned because of how frequently security officers are targeted along with police officers, along with firefighters, along with EMS. It's like these motherfuckers
They don't
cannot differentiate, or they choose not to differentiate.
they
I
don't
mean, how
care.
hard is it to read a fucking patch?
They don't care. All they see is the pretty silver or the pretty gold and say, "Oh, hey, this is somebody that we can target because," and whatever reason they choose to justify it in their own fucking minds.
Yeah.
Pardon my language.
Oh, you hear me dropping F-bombs, and I don't give two fucks. I really don't. And with that being said, I know Missouri has actually put this into effect. I do believe Missouri has. I know one of the states has. Security guards, security officers, security professionals, whatever title they go by or whatever you want to call them, are actually considered special victims now.
Good.
As they should be.
Yes.
Because security's there. They're always there. They're the first ones there. They see everything.
Yep. And
Well, most
unfortunately,
of us see everything.
and unfortunately,
I can't really
most
say we all see everything because that's a whole different subject
yeah, but see
for a different time.
the deal with security is this: the vast majority of security companies out there, their company policy is extremely strict, and security officers are to observe and report only. They
are
they
to
observe crimes and other things in progress, and they report it to the appropriate authorities.
and they de-escalate situations.
They de-escalate situations where they are forced to do so. Otherwise, company policy states that
Observe and report only.
they are to
And
observe and report only and to avoid the situation until authorities get there.
yeah, that's exactly it.
So,
But and
what is a security guard supposed to do? The security guard, say a security guard at a nightclub, a hired security, not or contracted security, not a you know not a
well,
security guard
okay,
that is
you use nightclub as an example. The problem is
okay. Let me rephrase it completely. Say a security guard at a parking garage.
okay.
Witnesses a woman being assaulted and raped in the garage. What is he? And his company policy states that he is to observe and report only. What does he do at that point? What is the moral compass that he uses? Does he intervene and stop it and potentially lose his job for intervening?
Or does he fight against every instinct he has as a decent human being and just watches like some
Exactly.
sick voyeur?
Exactly.
And that's the exact problem that even I have. Really and truly.
I mean, I don't remember the exact.
Not only that, some security companies honestly have a strict policy against carrying weapons or the use of deadly force or the use of any force.
Yeah.
And if you and the thing of being
That
is
goes along with the observe and report.
yeah. And if you're put into a situation where you have to defend yourself, defend person and property, like you said, you stand the chance of getting fired.
Yep. And they can legally do it because their company policy is observe and report only.
Yep. And by the same token, we, in some cases, have to actually debate that with the client.
Yeah.
Because
the
they
client,
ask, you know,
the client,
well, why didn't you step in and say something or do something? Well,
uh,
I can't, or I lose my job.
yep. And unfortunately, that is an argument to and discussion that the that is to left to the client and uh, the security company that they've chosen to hire. I mean, there are armed security companies out there.
But those are more or less utilized in higher risk areas.
They're utilized in higher risk areas, but and even then,
And all
they company policy most of the time dictates that the only time that they're allowed to use those firearms is in self-defense.
I cannot disagree. They can only use those firearms as the situation calls for it. So I can't dispute that. Not only that, depending on where you live, the armed security guard also has to not only conform or obey company policies, but they have to obey the standards set forth by by the municipality or the state in which they hold their guard license through.
Yeah, and that's a whole different animal and a whole different discussion for a different day.
Yep, yep. But where were we?
Yeah,
The train
so
derailed.
yeah, the train derailed, but you know, as far as this whole Rittenhouse thing goes, uh, I mean, even before the trial began, we all knew that Black Lives Matter and Antifa and uh, liberals
Let's
in general,
let's just call them for what they are. Domestic terrorist groups.
you know,
Hell,
they were going to use this as
a platform for a gun grab.
well, not necessarily a gun grab, but they were going to use it as a platform, no matter the outcome.
No. And
If
it's
if
kind of
Rittenhouse
working.
yeah, if Rittenhouse had been convicted, it would have served no other purpose than to empower these groups and escalate the violence even more, because at that point they know
That they can get away with it.
that they can get away with it. There will be no repercussion, whether it
Well,
be
there is no
legal.
repercussion now.
Well, what I'm saying is at this point, with Kyle Rittenhouse being acquitted, yes, the jury did their job and they went based on evidence. The wider message that the jury had no idea was being was had they had any part of to begin with. The wider message is, whether it be legal repercussion or personal repercussion, you you will face consequences for your actions.
And that's kind of the same thing in every legal case. Every high profile legal case. People are automatically convicted in the court of public opinion.
Yes.
So Kyle
And
Rittenhouse, whether he was acquitted or not, will be seen as a murderer for the rest of his life.
by certain groups. There are other groups
You
that
mean by certain morons?
uh,
I,
let's not stoop to their level and start calling them names.
okay. I so wanna
Yeah, I understand. I do too.
anal dwelling cockmanglers.
That's going a little too far, but The long and the short of it is, yes, they're using this now as a platform to once again try to limit gun rights, which are protected explicitly under the Constitution.
By the Second Amendment. Not only that, it came out during the trial that when they dismissed the firearms charge, that Kyle Rittenhouse, it was legal for Rittenhouse to possess the firearm he had because it is a hunting rifle. Technically, it's not an assault rifle. It's a hunting rifle. It's a hunting firearm.
And an AR-15. Well, an AR-15. The caliber is .223. .223 is the smallest caliber allowable in some states, in most states, and some states don't even allow .223s for this purpose, but it is the smallest caliber allowable for deer hunting. A .223 is largely considered a small game and or varmint gun that is to be used exclusively for things like coyotes, prairie dogs,
small game,
rabbits, things along those lines.
Squirrels, not so much.
.223 is a little heavy of a caliber for squirrels. I mean, most people, the biggest caliber that they'll use for squirrels is a .22, but by the same token, a lot of people that are hunting squirrels because of the safety issue will actually use air rifles over a .22 caliber rifle because the air rifles don't carry as far.
Yeah.
There's not as much risk of something behind their target that they don't know is there being hit because the round doesn't carry but a couple hundred yards.
True. And in all honesty, Rittenhouse did go there with good intentions. He went there to help.
He went there to help, and the biggest reason,
and knowingly walking into a riot to help, it would have been irresponsible. And I'm going to put this out there: it would have been irresponsible of him not to go there armed in some way. So he was able to protect himself.
True.
Did people need to die?
And
did they need to attack him?
No, they didn't need to attack him to begin with. If it was, in fact, a peaceful protest, as they claimed to begin with, this would have never become an issue because Rittenhouse would have never been attacked and property would have never been destroyed.
I mean,
it wasn't a protest.
It was a riot.
It was a riot. Now, the question has been posed as to why Rittenhouse was there to begin with, because he lived out of state.
He lived 20 minutes away from Kenosha. His dad lived in Kenosha.
So he arrived in Kenosha with the intent of protecting his family's property and the city that his family lived in.
And technically speaking, he was there visiting his dad. He also had friends that lived in Kenosha. He only lived with, from what I understand from news reports, he lived with his mom part-time.
Yeah.
So that kind of tells me that was quite possibly his primary residence was in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
That is a...
So to say he's a teen from Illinois is inaccurate.
Yeah.
If that's the case. Of course, I may have that confused.
Maybe. But right now, with the information that we have on hand, that's the only... That's the only conclusion that we can draw at this point.
And going back to celebrities inserting their 2 cents,
Celebrities need to stay, in my personal
well,
opinion, celebrities need to stay in their lane.
yeah,
They are entertainers.
stay in your lane, bro. But
You know, if you want to take up causes like protecting the environment
fine,
and
do that on your time.
yeah, do that on your time. Great, not a problem. Don't use your influence,
I.e., this is particular to sports figures like Kaepernick.
do not use your influence to a spread false information, and b call for violence. If you're calling for violence in any way, shape, or form, under the laws that govern rioting to begin with, you can be prosecuted, and you should be prosecuted. I
No,
don't care. I don't care if you're an elected official, a movie celebrity, or a sports figure. You should be prosecuted. Period. End of story.
but where I was going to go with it was the guy, the person of interest that was arrested in connection with the Waukesha Christmas parade was a big time follower of Kaepernick and a huge supporter of Black Lives Matter and was very anti-white. Now my question is when they go to prosecute him, because there's no doubt that he was involved, if not he was the driver mowing people down, if it was to mow down white people, will he be charged with a hate crime? Because last I checked, race was federally protected. It was not exclusive to minorities. It was not exclusive to black people, Asians, so on and so forth. All races.
Yep. And it has yet to be seen as to whether or not the prosecution in that case is going to have the intestinal fortitude to charge that as a hate crime.
Because the way I see it, what's good for one is good for the other.
Yeah. I mean, my question is he was out, the driver was out on bail because if he would have stayed in jail on the charges that he was currently facing,
One of them was for bail jumping.
one of them was for bail jumping to begin with, it would have violated his constitutional rights
To a speedy trial.
to a speedy trial. Now, my question is if that was going to violate his rights to a speedy trial, then why couldn't they have sped up the process and got the trial?
Why couldn't they have put him, if they were going to let him out on such a cheap bond, a cheap bail, which they should have never done in the first damn place? Why didn't they have some sort of electronic monitoring on him?
Exactly.
More,
And the biggest reason for that is he was up on charges of bail jumping to begin with. So if you're going to let him out on bail for a charge for bail jumping, then he needs to be electronically monitored.
yeah. And now here's the real kicker. His attorney for all his charges in Milwaukee has flat out stated that their law firm will not represent him for this.
Well,
so the next question is are they going to, and you're right, it is their right. So are they going to keep representing him for the other charges that he does have in Milwaukee, or are they just going to say, tough luck?
They might, but by the same token,
I mean, he is entitled to representation.
He is entitled to representation,
but he can get a public defender for that.
Yeah.
Or a different public defender for that. I don't know if his current attorney is appointed by the court or not, but he can get a public defender.
Yeah. And
to deal with
and in some
all cases, but
in some areas,
but good luck finding. And I had to hand it to the attorney that he did retain for his charges in Milwaukee. That I have to hand it to this attorney. He has a moral compass. He's not a complete scumbag.
It could be that the attorney in Milwaukee isn't necessarily looking at it in that way. This is in this current deal that he's arrested on is in Waukesha. Maybe,
which is not too far from Milwaukee.
Well, in the state of Missouri, an attorney is licensed for the state.
Yeah.
We don't know if that same rule applies to other states. Maybe in other states, that attorney has to be licensed in every single county that they're going to be practicing in, rather than the state as a whole.
Yeah.
It could be a simple matter of that. We don't know at this point.
With the way that the attorney worded his statement, though, he made it sound like he did have the option, and he said no, not happening. Well, that's the way it was worded.
It could be a matter of retainer fee at that point, because.
But that's going back to making it sound like it's all about money, and I would like to think that it was a moral decision.
I would like to think that it's a moral decision as well. But there are other possibilities as to why this attorney elected not to represent this individual in this new case.
And he also said no one from his firm is going to represent him on this case. So I'm honestly kind of wondering, are they going to drop all his cases then? Because obviously this person is a danger to society, should have never been let out in the first damn place, and needs to be locked up indefinitely.
Yeah. I agree that they should be locked up indefinitely, if not on this charge, but on
all charges.
On all charges. But there are limits to how long they can be incarcerated for each charge.
I mean, with this case, he's looking at most 5 murder charges, because that's how many people have passed away so far. 6,
and hopefully,
from what I read, 6 children are still in critical condition.
And God is willing, no more pass away.
So that's 5 charges of murder. I think it's between, I can't remember if it's 20 or 40 people that were injured, but that's attempted murder charges.
I mean, and they can prove intent.
I mean, he fully crashed through a friggin' barricade to hit those people.
Yes, and they have all the evidence they need to charge him with first-degree murder on the 5 deaths.
Well, here's the thing. We live in a society of technology. How many people are videoing it? It doesn't... You can do a quick Google search and find videos from that happening.
Yes, but
before, during, and after.
Yeah. And, I don't know what Wisconsin law is on capital punishment, but
I think they have the death penalty.
There is if he's charged with first degree murder in these 5 deaths, he could be facing the death penalty.
And here's the thing: if they push it as a hate crime, that escalates it to a federal charge. That makes it federal.
Well, the problem with that is, does the federal government allow for capital punishment?
Yes, they do. If you remember, Lisa Montgomery was executed this year or last year and she was sitting on federal death row.
Yeah. So there is
And
that possibility.
she's not. I don't think she's the only federal inmate that was sitting on death row that has been executed.
You just don't hear much about it.
Oh no, you do, because the federal government really doesn't execute that many people, or they didn't for the longest time, and they really didn't do federal executions until Trump pushed for them.
No, it wasn't just Trump. It was.
Well, they're friggin' sitting on death row,
It was
costing
other.
taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, it was. It was. There were other individuals, not just Trump, that were pushing and had been pushing for years.
The death row, again, different topic for a different day. We're kind of losing daylight here, so
Yeah, I think this is going to be
a good stopping point. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe, click the bell to receive notifications, like it, dislike it. We don't care. It's you still watched it or you still listened to it. And if you want to continue discussion, drop a comment, or you can reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and here pretty soon, Discord as well. So, and I'll also drop a link for our Patreon page. Till next time, stay grumpy and stay salty.
Yep.